The morning sun poured through the tall courthouse windows, casting long beams across the polished marble floors. Judge Malcolm Hayes, a man in his mid-40s with a reputation for fairness, adjusted his robe as he prepared for the day's docket. His mind was focused, as always, until the next case was called. Case number 212, State vs. Eli Thompson. The clerk's voice echoed across the courtroom. Judge Hayes froze. That name, Eli Thompson, was a name he hadn't heard in over 20 years. Memories of dusty summer streets, baseball games in the park, and laughter with a boy who had been more like a brother than a friend came rushing back. Eli Thompson, now in his late 30s, stood at the defendant's table. His suit was crisp but ill-fitting, a sign of nervous preparation. His hands trembled slightly as he looked up, and recognition sparked in his eyes. "Your Honor," the clerk asked, breaking the silence. Judge Hayes cleared his throat. Yes, I remember this case," he said, forcing his voice steady. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as everyone noticed the sudden tension. Witnesses shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Attorneys exchanged glances. Something unspoken hung in the air. Hayes's mind raced. Eli had been like a brother, and yet here he was, on trial for armed robbery. Could the boy who had once shared his lunches and dreams really be guilty of such a crime? As the bailiff began the proceedings, Hayes took a deep breath. He knew he had to remain impartial, but the pull of old friendship was a storm inside him. And deep down, he sensed that this trial would unravel secrets far beyond the crime itself. The gavel slammed. "We will begin." And in that instant, both men knew their shared past would no longer remain buried. The courtroom was silent except for the soft scratching of pens and the distant hum of the air conditioning. Judge Hayes stared at Eli, struggling to reconcile the boy he once knew with the man standing accused of armed robbery. "Mr. Thompson," the prosecutor began, "you are charged with the theft of $5,000 from a downtown jewelry store, including the use of a firearm. How do you plead?" Eli's voice shook, but he answered clearly, "Not guilty, Your Honor." The room shifted, surprised by the firm tone. Hayes leaned back in his chair, studying the man before him. He saw traces of the mischievous boy he had once coached in Little League, the same eyes, the same stubborn jaw. But there was something else now, a haunted look, as if life had thrown Eli into shadows Hayes couldn't even imagine. The prosecutor continued, presenting surveillance footage from the store. The grainy video showed a man in a hooded jacket, quick and precise, taking the cash from the counter. The jury leaned forward. Hayes felt his stomach twist, something didn't add up. The figure's movement seemed deliberate, almost forced. Hayes's mind flashed back to childhood. Eli had never been violent, never careless. Something was wrong. "Your Honor," the defense attorney said, "we request to call a witness immediately. A man who can confirm Mr. Thompson's whereabouts at the time of the alleged crime." Hayes raised an eyebrow. The courtroom murmured. This could be the turning point. Eli swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the table. For the first time, he looked vulnerable, raw. Judge Hayes's gavel hovered. He knew that whatever came next could either destroy or redeem the boy he once called a friend. The doors opened, and a figure stepped in, sun glinting off the courthouse windows behind him. The courtroom collectively held its breath. It was someone who could change everything. The courtroom doors creaked open, and a tall man stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking against the marble. Sunlight spilled through the windows, casting a sharp outline around him. The room fell silent. Every eye followed his every move. Judge Hayes squinted, and then his heart skipped a beat. "No, it can't be," he whispered under his breath. Eli's eyes widened. Recognition sparked, then relief and disbelief. The man approaching the witness stand was Marcus Lane, Eli's childhood neighbor, the same boy who had shared countless summer afternoons, scraped knees, and secret treehouse meetings. Marcus had moved away years ago, and Hayes had lost track of him completely. Marcus took the oath, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "I was with Eli on the day of the robbery," he began, "from 10 a.m. until almost 3 p.m. We were at the community center, preparing for the local festival. He couldn't have been at the jewelry store." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor froze, flipping through pages, while the defense attorney's eyes lit up. Hayes's chest tightened. Could this really be true? "Can you provide proof?" the prosecutor demanded. Marcus nodded and pulled out a small stack of dated photos and a time-stamped receipt from the center's office. "These show Eli's presence during the exact time of the alleged crime," he explained. The jurors leaned forward, whispering among themselves. Eli's hands trembled, but for the first time that morning, a flicker of hope shone in his eyes. Judge Hayes swallowed hard, trying to maintain his composure. His mind raced. The man he had once called a friend, now a defendant, was likely innocent. But how had things spiraled so far out of control? And why had no one come forward sooner? The sunlight hit Eli's face, illuminating the stress lines, the fear, the lingering doubt. The room was charged with anticipation. Hayes rapped the gavel lightly. "We will continue," he said, though inside, he already knew, the trial had just taken a turn that could change everything. Part 4. The sunlight streaming through the courthouse windows highlighted every detail, the polished floors, the tense faces of the jury, and the anxious lines on Eli's face. Judge Hayes leaned forward, gripping the bench, every nerve alert. Marcus continued, laying out the timeline meticulously. "We were at the community center the entire afternoon," he said, sliding the photos and receipts across the table. "Eli couldn't have been anywhere near the jewelry store." The prosecutor's face hardened. "And yet, Mr. Thompson's fingerprints were found on the display case. How do you explain that?" Eli's voice, shaky but determined, finally broke the courtroom's heavy silence. "I never touched that case. I swear. Someone must have planted the evidence, someone who knew I'd be blamed." Judge Hayes felt a jolt run through him. He knew Eli too well, he would not lie about something like this. The memories of their childhood flooded back, Eli's honesty, his loyalty, the nights they had spent dreaming about their futures. Suddenly, a quiet murmur rose from the back of the courtroom. A security officer stepped forward, holding a small folder. "Your Honor, we reviewed additional footage from a nearby alley," he said. "It shows another man leaving the store at the exact time. We've identified him, James Calloway, a known criminal in the district." Gasps erupted. Eli's shoulders slumped in relief. Judge Hayes's heart pounded. The truth had been hidden in plain sight, buried beneath assumptions and old grudges. Hayes's voice was steady but heavy. "This trial will not proceed against Mr. Thompson until we investigate this new evidence. The court must ensure justice is served, not rushed." Eli's eyes met Hayes's, a silent understanding passing between them. The boy he had once known, the man now cleared of suspicion, was finally being seen for who he truly was. For Hayes, the sunlight that day felt warmer, brighter, almost forgiving. But he knew the final act, the reckoning. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting golden beams across the courtroom as tension hung thick in the air. Judge Hayes rose from the bench, his robe falling neatly, eyes locked on Eli. "Mr. Thompson," Hayes began, his voice calm but firm, "new evidence has surfaced proving your innocence. The court recognizes that a miscarriage of justice nearly occurred." Eli's hands trembled as relief washed over him. He glanced at Marcus, the boyhood friend who had come to his rescue, and a small, grateful smile broke across his face. The prosecutor, still flustered, cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we request a full investigation into the actual perpetrator." Hayes nodded. "It will be done. And the court will ensure that Mr. Calloway is held accountable for his crimes." As the gavel came down, silence filled the room, heavy with awe and realization. Jurors exchanged stunned glances, and spectators whispered among themselves. But for Eli and Hayes, the world had shifted. The bond of childhood friendship, long buried under years of distance and hardship, had been rekindled in the most extraordinary circumstances. Hayes stepped down from the bench and approached Eli. "You've been through hell, Eli. But you held your truth. I should have recognized it sooner." Eli's voice cracked with emotion. "Thank you, Malcolm. I never stopped hoping that someone would see me as I really am." Outside, the sunlight bathed the courthouse steps, illuminating the faces of those who had waited for justice. Eli breathed deeply, free for the first time in years. Hayes stood beside him, a silent protector, a witness to the power of truth and loyalty. The day had begun with tension and uncertainty, but it ended with clarity, justice, and the reaffirmation of a lifelong bond. Two boys who had grown into men found each other again, not as children in the sunlit streets, but as friends bound by honor, courage, and forgiveness. And as they walked out together, the courthouse behind them seemed less imposing, the world outside brighter, and the future, finally, uncertain, yet full of hope.